Haakon the Good was praised after death in a poem that sends the Christian king toward Odin's hall. That near-contemporary contradiction is more revealing than a simple story of failed conversion. It places Haakon between his personal affiliation, the ritual expectations of supporters, and a poet's language of royal honor. Later sagas turned this tension into vivid feasts, arguments, and reluctant pagan observance. The earlier poem confirms a political dilemma, but not every scene created to explain it. Haakon was a son of Harald Fairhair, according to the Scandinavian historical tradition. He grew up at the court of the English king Æthelstan, whose Christian household shaped his youth. The nickname Æthelstan's foster son appears in Skaldic poetry, lending unusual support to that cross-sea connection. When Haakon returned to Norway, he challenged the rule of his brother Eric. His success depended less upon abstract inheritance than upon leaders willing to transfer allegiance. Later narratives say he promised to restore property and reduce burdens associated with Eric's regime. Those precise bargains are difficult to verify, yet negotiated support fits the structure of 10th century kingship. Regional assemblies and aristocratic households could make a claimant viable or leave him exposed. Haakon arrived as a Christian, but his followers did not thereby become one confessional bloc. Their pre-Christian practices varied, though public feasting and sacrificial customs could express political community. A ruler absent from those occasions risked appearing absent from the relationships that sustained his throne. His problem was therefore not choosing privately between two theologies. He had to govern when royal ritual, legal consent, and religious reform pointed in different directions. Written evidence for Haakon is uneven and mostly preserved after his lifetime. The Skaldic poem Hákonarmál, attributed to Eyvindr Skaldus Spillir, is the crucial early witness. Its language belongs to praise poetry, where gods and the afterlife form a heroic framework. The poem imagines Odin preparing a welcome for Haakon after his final battle. This does not prove Haakon secretly rejected Christianity or literally expected Valhalla. It shows that a poet addressing Haakon's warrior following could commemorate him through pagan mythic imagery. That audience mattered because royal identity had to remain intelligible to the men who fought for him. Later, Christian authors inherited the awkward poem and constructed narratives capable of resolving its contradiction. Ágrip, written around the late 12th century, offers an early prose account of Norwegian kings. The 13th century Heimskringla provides the fullest familiar version, composed much farther from Haakon's reign. Snorri Sturluson describes the king bringing clergy from England and attempting to establish churches. The broad direction is plausible since Haakon's upbringing and reputation connect him firmly with Christianity. Specific missionary arrangements remain harder to corroborate through contemporary documentation. No surviving royal charter records a nationwide program under his seal. Archaeology likewise reveals gradual Christianization rather than a horizon that can be assigned neatly to Haakon. Christian objects and changing burials preceded him in some coastal communities. Elsewhere, furnished graves and older ritual patterns continued beyond his death. That regional mosaic imposed practical limits upon any ruler seeking rapid religious uniformity. Saga tradition concentrates those limits at assemblies in western Norway and Trøndelag. Haakon reportedly proposed Christian observance only to meet determined opposition from farmers and leading men. The accounts may preserve institutional memory, but their speeches are literary compositions rather than minutes. They accurately dramatize a structural fact. Law could not simply be rewritten without political backing. Royal retainers might enforce commands locally, yet sustained reform needed chieftains who controlled households and districts. Haakon's Christian advisors could offer international religious authority but not replace those networks. The most famous episode occurs at a sacrificial feast associated with Lade. Saga writers say Earl Sigurd mediated while participants pressed Haakon to share ritual food and drink. One version makes him eat a small piece of horse liver and dedicate ceremonial cups through an ambiguous sign. This scene is memorable precisely because it compresses political compromise into bodily action. It was recorded centuries later, and no contemporary witness verifies the liver, gesture, or dialogue. Rejecting its literal detail does not make the underlying tension imaginary. Communal feasts redistributed food, displayed rank, confirmed obligations, and connected rule with sacred custom. A king refusing every ritual component could insult more than personal belief. Participation, however limited, could also damage his standing with clergy and Christian supporters. Haakon's room for maneuver narrowed because both communities interpreted public acts. Saga authors portray him postponing reform, balancing loyalty against the risk of rebellion. That portrait contrasts sharply with later conversion kings remembered for coercion. Haakon lacked either the power or willingness to force a decisive break. His restraint helped preserve rule, yet it left church organization dependent upon local footholds. Political loyalty remained conditional even apart from religion. Eric's sons repeatedly challenged Haakon, drawing support from the Danish royal sphere. Conflicts linked Norway's coast to wider competition across the North Sea. Haakon won important battles, and poetry commemorated the danger surrounding his kingship. At Avaldsnes, royal control mattered because the Karmsund straight connected sailing routes along western Norway. At Fitjar, probably around 961, Haakon defeated another attack but received a mortal wound. Later prose gives a detailed death scene, including reflections upon burial and belief. Those words cannot be accepted as recorded testimony. The older Hákonarmáls supplies a different memorial, one designed for public praise rather than Christian edification. Its Haakon enters the company of gods because his generosity and military leadership fit the poem's heroic code. The poem even acknowledges his protection of pagan sanctuaries, a politically significant claim. That praise suggests accommodation had become part of how supporters understood his good rule. His epithet the Good may reflect this favorable memory, not a modern moral verdict on religious tolerance. Tolerance itself can mislead because Haakon governed within unequal obligations rather than a secular system of free choice. Dependence followed household decisions, ritual pressure operated collectively, and Christianity also carried royal authority. People could combine practices without defining themselves through later confessional categories. The binary preserved in narrative sources was sharpened by authors who knew a more institutional Christian society. By their time, Norway's conversion had become a story about exemplary kings and overcome paganism. Haakon served that story as the well-intentioned precursor whose gentleness could not complete the task. Olaf Tryggvason and Olaf Haraldsson then appeared as forceful successors within a providential sequence. Such architecture explains later Christian monarchy, but it may distort 10th century choices into stages of an inevitable plan. For Haakon, the outcome was not yet inevitable. Churches required patrons, priests needed protection, and ritual changes had to survive beyond a ruler's immediate presence. His compromises were political instruments, though they may also have involved genuine religious conflict. No source opens his private conscience, and later writers had strong reasons to imagine it. The material record offers a needed counterweight by refusing a sudden national conversion. Cross pendants, grave forms, church sites, and settlement patterns vary in chronology and meaning. A cross could express devotion, affiliation, fashion, or protection, while grave change might follow law or family strategy. None can identify Haakon's decision at a particular feast. Together, they show communities already negotiating religious alternatives before royal policy became dominant. Haakon's reign belongs inside that negotiation, not outside it as a failed opening act. His political achievement was maintaining substantial support, while his Christianity remained publicly constrained. Its limit was that accommodation did not create a self-sustaining ecclesiastical structure across Norway. After Fitjar, succession disputes continued, and Eric's sons gained power. Haakon neither preserved a stable pagan settlement nor inaugurated an irreversible Christian monarchy. He demonstrated that kingship could survive ambiguity when coalition mattered more than uniformity. Christian historians could praise his intention while blaming pagan resistance for delay. Poetry could honor his generosity through Odin without preserving a pagan confession from the king himself. Modern retellings often choose one Haakon, either tolerant statesman or compromised missionary. The evidence instead shows a ruler whose public religious choices were constrained by reciprocal loyalty. One discovery could greatly sharpen this picture: a securely dated church foundation or inscription tied directly to his patronage. Such evidence would measure institutional action beyond the broad claims of later prose. Until then, Hákonarmál remains the closest voice, celebrating political accommodation in imagery Haakon's Christianity did not erase. Haakon the Good endured between faiths because his crown rested upon people who did not cross that boundary together.